Hey guys, welcome back. So continuing with more talk about Brian Hill's Killmonger and the new telling of his origin, I gotta say I'm really enjoying this series so far because it's one of those cases where you don't need to agree with the character. And it's not as if it's glorifying or condoning any of his actions, but in my opinion, I feel like it really does a good job of helping you to understand the character by showing you the journey that has been just brushed over in so many other tellings throughout the years. And with getting into this, I want to point out some of the locations and their significance throughout the history of this character. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so previously we talked about the journey of Killmonger and a lot of the things that he went through growing up with being stolen from his country, being used by Ndemwe, being used by Ulysses Claw, and over the course of years wanting to take that power back and planning to do so by the method he was taught by the both of them. And though they didn't teach him how to kill, at least not directly, they led by example through their malicious practices, which eventually taught Erik that if you want something, then you have to take it. And so fueled by his anger from everything that they've taken from him, he's been groomed into this eye for an eye mentality to the point of where he chooses the violent path that others have used on him as lessons and additional education in a way to gain freedom and ultimately figure out what it is that he wants for himself as a form of compensation for everything that he's lost in his life. But what he doesn't realize is because he's fueled by anger and led by anger, all of these just make for the ingredients to slowly become the thing that he hates. And it's not like he doesn't come across good advice, but he's so intoxicated with anger that oftentimes when good advice comes his way, it just kind of just rolls off his back, which is a very dangerous line to walk. But at this point in his life, with him having killed Ndemwe and planning to do the same to Claw, his attempt is botched by a woman named Night, which eventually gets him caught up with this group of mercenaries who have their own history of troubled past, and as a result, they've come together under the alias of different chess pieces to contract missions for hire in order to make a living. And these guys are extremely good at what they do, and it's for that reason that they work for Wilson Fisk, who I like that they bring in here because from their perspective, which is something that they tried to impose on Erik, is that Wilson Fisk, the kingpin, is pretty much the king of New York, who for one doesn't want Claw dead because they make a lot of money together. And the only reason that he didn't kill Erik is because he saw the potential in him for even getting that close to Claw in the first place, which initially was King's Call, who's the leader of these mercenaries, who also sees this potential in Erik. But even though he doesn't trust him 100%, he does trust his anger, and with recognizing Erik's potential and knowing what he wants, he offers Erik the opportunity to join them as a means to a mutual benefit. And so when Erik agreed to this really as just a means to kill Claw, because at this point that's as far as his plans went, but when he agreed to join them, the first mission that they went on is a mission where they're sent to Long Island to kill 4 targets without any detail of why, and all they really know is that these 4 are in town for an international meeting and that they're meeting in Long Island. But aside from that, we don't get much detail of why. But just looking back to Rise of the Black Panther, where a lot of this Killmonger series seems to point back to with little pieces here and there, Long Island was pretty significant because at the time when King T'Chaka's wife had taken ill with a mysterious rare autoimmune disease, he had sought out Howard Stark in Long Island to use some of his bio-nanite technology in order to save her life. But of course, as we know, at the time that technology never made its way back because of the secret pickups being compromised, and mainly because of Ndemwe leaking information to Hydra, who as a result prohibited this package from making its way back to Wakanda, which possibly could have saved T'Challa's mother, who died 1 week after his birth. And even though that's what we know prior to this point, at this point in time we're not given a direct connection to it. But as of right now, that's where my suspicions lay. But during Erik's time in Long Island with this team, they're putting together their plan to take down their 4 marks, which they do have to organize carefully because if they hit one, the other 3 will scatter. And with King, who's given everyone the details and pretty much just hearing their feedback, and from there he'll approve which course of action they take, Knight suggests that the 4 of them split up, get all 4 at the same time to avoid any loose ends. And as far as Rook, who's more concerned with Erik being a liability, and mostly because this whole time he seems to not really be paying attention, on top of the fact that Rook and Erik often go back and forth, but King assures him that he trusts Erik's anger, and if Erik steps out of line, that he has a backup plan for that. But as it turns out, when Erik proposes his idea, telling them not to make it too complicated, just call all 4 of them, lie, say Wilson Fisk wants to meet up in a secluded place, and that way you have all the targets in one spot, which is an idea that Rook doesn't like, but he doesn't like anything Erik says anyway. But for the record, this is an idea that Erik actually got from Ulysses Claw, once again applying what he's learned and executing those tactics. But with things getting heated between Rook and Erik, he takes Erik outside, warning him that Rook has a healing factor and he can only be killed through decapitation, and just letting him know so he doesn't find out the hard way. And in addition, he warns Erik to be careful of his anger, which is leading him to feel like he's invincible when in actuality he's not. And he compares it to an old gun, telling him that sometimes it might work and other times it might just blow up in your face. But at that time when you need it, you don't know which outcome is gonna be, which is a very good analogy, might I add. But as it turns out, King ended up going with Erik's plan, and they end up calling these 4 targets into one location where you have the international lawyer, the narcotics trafficker, the money launderer, and the accountant, who are expecting to meet Fisk and totally unaware that they are actually the targets for this hit. Because when they do implement Erik's plan, and by doing so Erik almost gets killed, Rook offers himself as a human shield to save Erik's life. And even with Erik being symbolized as the pawn out of all the marks, which is a bit suspicious if you ask me, but Rook follows through taking the fire for Erik and saving him, mainly because he understands that Erik isn't that skilled at this point. And though he may have came up with a great idea, his tactics of execution aren't all the way there, which just goes to show us how far this Killmonger is with his shaky, nervous hands and his moments of hesitation, how far he is from who he will become. But I also would say it's a huge moment for Rook, who showed even though him and Erik don't get along, that there's still a level of concern there to where he doesn't want him to die and he's willing to be a potential friend. But it's also not long after this job where King gives Erik another word of advice, where we once again get one of those glimmers of Erik being pointed in the right direction in the midst of all this. And it's really King following up what he told Erik outside of the club by letting him know that rather than having this anger making you feel like you're invincible, that he should consider using hope as a more powerful tool, because people who believe that hope is at the end of the tunnel can actually endure anything. And at the end of the day, each one of them has their individual goals for freedom, but none of them are going to make it unless they have some sort of hope at the end of that tunnel. But not long after this time, Wilson Fisk calls for a meeting with King to let him know that there's another person who he's considering to potentially take their place. And Wilson Fisk doesn't really care for having like a number of mercenaries. The way it works with him, and the way we've seen it work with him, is that when he believes that he's found someone better, you either fall back or you take out the mercenary that he's hired to take your spot. And after the meeting, when King tells the rest that he's sending them to kill Bullseye, to which he's like, nope, we pretty much been burned, we gotta go. And at this point, Erik doesn't even know who Bullseye is. He remembers Devilman, and Rook's like, nah bruh, it's Daredevil. But with Knight trying to convince King that they need to take out Bullseye so they can get that bigger hit and potentially it be their exit plan, her and King go back and forth because he believes this is a plan of Wilson Fisk in order to take them out, which I wouldn't necessarily agree with, because you guys remember not long ago we talked about another instance where Wilson Fisk had did the same thing back when Deadpool was working for him and Bullseye wanted his job back. And because of that, we know and we've seen that for Wilson Fisk, it's nothing personal. It's more so a matter of let the best man win, because he doesn't want the most mercenaries, he only wants the best, which should have been Deadpool, but we ain't gonna go there. But while Knight is trying to reason with King, who rather enjoys staying alive, and Erik finally makes amends with Rook, who's decided at this point that the two of them should just put the past behind them and just start their friendship with a clean slate. At this point in time, they're all completely off guard and distracted from the main objective at hand, which is something in their line of work you just cannot do because it'll cost you everything. And as a result, in the middle of their conversation, Rook randomly gets these bolas just randomly wrapped around his neck, to which seconds later just explode. And without the slightest chance to react, they're attacked by Bullseye, who has clearly made his decision. And with Erik, who initially attempts to take him on, telling Bullseye that he's not afraid of him, and King forces them to retreat, knowing at this point if they stay, all three of them will be killed as well. But as a result of this attack catching them off guard and happening so quickly, and with them losing Rook, they burn down the safe house, with King telling them that leaving New York is non-negotiable. And when Erik responds that they should take out Fisk, King leaves the two of them, telling Erik that he's not strong enough to kill a king, which is a bit of foreshadowing, and not to Erik actually killing Kingpin or killing King himself, but more so to the point of us knowing that he'll accept these words as a challenge to later become someone who can. But after this point, and continuing the conversation with Knight that Erik and Knight had at this same location, to where she wanted to know more about him and he told her he'd let her know once he got to know her better, well, let's just say that he got to know her better. And with doing so, gaining a level of trust with Knight to the point of where he told her more about Wakanda and his history of Wakanda being of royal blood. And because he feels like they let him be taken, part of him wants to go back there, mainly to make them pay. And he tells her after he kills Claw, he wants her to go back to Wakanda with him. But before they do any of that, she has to arrange for them to get out of New York first to ensure their safety. But not long after she leaves, Erik is met with a strike team that take him into custody, and doing this made to look like they're working for Wilson Fisk, but actually, as it turns out, Knight had set him up, and she's doing so because unknown to the rest of the team, she had been making a deal with S.H.I.E.L.D. as a way to start a new life to where she would have a clean slate and not have to look over her shoulder. In this particular deal, which was being led by Natasha Romanoff, who wanted Knight in return to spill all her intel and hand over King, Knight agreed to because she has the mentality that you hand over friends in order to survive, which is so many levels of messed up. But as far as Erik, who at this time is being held on a shipping container, who calls out to Bast for a way out, Bast responds, who at this point has been constantly calling back for him to return to Wakanda to serve under T'Challa, which he refuses to do because this will deny him from getting his vengeance against Claw, which is something that he refuses to give up for anyone. But still, while they're on the ship, Knight wakes him up, filling him in on her deal with S.H.I.E.L.D. and her agreeing to cooperate with them in taking down King, and she solicits his help, which was also the request of Black Widow. And though he does agree to help her, he also knows in the back of his mind how frail her loyalty is, so he agrees to do it with the intention of just to do it to get S.H.I.E.L.D. off of their back, and telling her with just a little more blood, a little more war, that the two of them will be free and able to go to Wakanda. And Erik tells her if she believes in him, if she believes in the two of them, he'll make sure that she's free from S.H.I.E.L.D., and because of her, he'll actually put aside his vengeance and make her his queen when he returns to Wakanda. And man, there must be something special about this girl make you want to put away your vengeance, because he wasn't about to do it for Bast, but he'll do it for her. But on top of that, I'm curious to know what you guys think. Like for Erik, after seeing Knight's true colors, and with him at this point knowing how frail her loyalty is, which is something we had seen back at his apartment means a big deal to him. Like, I want to know what you guys think. Do you believe that he really means this, or is he once again taking a lesson out of her book of actions and playing her at her own game? But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.